For those who've had sex with someone who spoke little to none of your language, what was the experience like? I was a seafarer, and I did not go to a prostitute, but a colleague did in China. He was doing the girl a missionary, and she was quiet. Suddenly, she picks up her phone and starts typing. The guy was thrusting while questioning what she was doing. She turns the phone and shows him the screen on Google Translate, saying, "Come on, baby, I love how." Because it was translated text, you have no idea if that's supposed to be sexy, talk, or a warning. That time is almost up. I never thought of it this way. Somewhere out there is a comic of a man doing his best to please a woman who is using Wile E. Coyote-esque signs while doom-scrolling on her phone. I hooked up with this French girl years ago, and while I was doing her from behind, she said something in French, which I didn't understand. I said, "In English?" Single quotation mark. Because she repeated it in English, but she had a frog in her throat kinda, plus the heavy accent. So what I heard was, "Fuck me like I'm yours." But it sounded exactly like SpongeBob was saying it. It was both the hottest and most hilarious thing anyone has ever said to me. I tried so fucking hard to keep from laughing. This one needs to be at the top. When I first moved to Japan, I spoke very little Japanese. I could have a simple conversation, but clearly, in the realm of the bedroom, vocab and grammar was lacking. Surprisingly, it was never that much of a problem. There is definitely some hurdles, but unless you're a complete sociopath, there is a big difference between a good moan and an uncomfortable one. Mostly lots of hand gestures and taps. If you are going fast or hard and get a tap, it's clear that means slow down or softer. However, if you want a funny story, I went out for dinner with this girl and she missed her last train, which is often code for let's spend the night. Naturally start off with some making out and petting, but then quickly I went to oral. After a while I stopped and went to move on to other things. She tapped me on the shoulder and said something I didn't get. She saw the confusion and just stuck her tongue out. Back down I go. This time, I go until she finishes. Go back to some kissing, and soon I'm tapped again and tongue out again. This whole thing repeats like 2 more times, and then she finally says something I understood. She said, "Otsuka," which is what you say at the end of the workday to your colleges, like, "Thanks for you hard work," or "Good job," rolls over and goes to sleep. I once met a guy in the club while studying abroad, Eastern Europe. Young, naive me got his contact information and took a train to his village. He picked me up, went grocery shopping, and cooked dinner for me, and we maybe spoke 10 full sentences to each other during this process. He showed me a video on his computer, and I was starting to get impatient, so I Google translated, "Do you want to have sex?" The sex was amazing. You reminded me of a girl I was dating who basically asked me, "So are you gonna fuck me or not?" as we stayed in a similarly awkward bedroom situation. It was funny and kinda sexy, NGL. One time I had to spell it out for a dude. Went to his place, we were having drinks. I finally just said, "Are we fucking or what?" He was surprised. I'm like, "One drove 45 minutes to get here." It wasn't for free GTs. He was very happy. He was from Moldova. We were in the dark, and I thought he came on my stomach. I attempted to say what I thought in Russian. "Did you come?" He responded, "I don't understand." I asked, "Did you come?" "Yes, I am here. I don't understand." I asked, "Skeet, skeet," because the Yin Yang twins were at their height of popularity. He answered, "Yes." "Did you not feel on your stomach?" Yin Yang twins bridging gaps of communication together. The second time in a week the Yin Yang twins have entered the zeitgeist. First it was SeaWorld performance, now this. From the window to the walls? Yes, once. Let me paint the picture. I was 20 at the time, working as a bartender at a fun little place downtown. My roommate at the time was also a bartender there, and that night, we were working a shift together. It's a somewhat busy night, and around midnight, this very pretty girl sits at my bar alone. I go to take her drink order. She smiles and says, "Cerveza," beer. I get her a beer and get back to tending the bar. For the rest of the night, she's getting hit on, and throughout all of it, she's just making eye contact with me and smiling. End of the night comes, and I go to give her the bill. She smiles and hands me a folded napkin, then pays and leaves. I figure it's a phone number. Turns out it's a hotel and a room number. I finish closing the bar with my roommate and get into his car to go back home. As we're driving, I tell him the story and laugh. He slams on the brakes and asks which hotel, then promptly does O-turn and brings me to the hotel. I say, "No, that's stupid." He says I can take a cab home because he won't be driving me back home. He then opens the glove box and pulls out a rubber, tells me to get out of his car. So I did, went into the hotel, went up to the room, knocked on the door. Mind you, it's like 4:30 a.m. at his point, and this cute girl from the bar opens the door wearing nothing. I'm in shock. I go and shower and climb into bed naked. She doesn't speak a word of English, only Spanish. We have a very fun night with very little communication. She spoke to me in Spanish and I understood nothing. Then I left and never saw her again. Her name is Perla. Does a dead guy count? Edit. Deef. I meant deaf. Edit 2. Forgot to answer the question. It was really good, it was quieter, and involved more typing than I'm accustomed to, but Lyd still give it 2 thumbs up. Oh, man! I forgot the best part. He liked getting an actual blowjob. I'll try to describe the process here. I would run my tongue around the inside of his foreskin, and then literally blow air into it, which would puff up the foreskin like a balloon. No one I've asked about it since has ever heard of or experienced this, and I tried it on another uncircumcised guy once, and it did not work. So maybe the deaf guy had more elastic foreskin? I contemplate it sometimes. Bed? That would be a hell of a language barrier. Got me scared for a second. Had my first time with a sexy MILF Latina named Carmelita. Met in a bar. She was visiting my country. In my town with few friends for a week. I don't speak Spanish. She lead. It was cool. Hardly say my primo experience sexual while shaking because of stress. She doesn't care that she was my first. At some point she's on me and put her breast on my face. They were big. Really big. Almost ran out of oxygen. I was skinny and she was pretty thick. So I had to push her hard. She realized after 10 minutes of broken Spanish and English explanation that I almost died the best way possible. She left, and we continue. I was stationed in Korea, and I hooked up with a middle-aged woman. I have no idea exactly how old she was, or even anything tangible about her, such as her real name, profession, marital status, anything. She spoke very broken English, only enough to progress through necessary tasks and functions, but not enough to have a conversation. What this did, though, at least from my perspective, is it let us have a very personal connection through only physical senses, actions, and gestures, so on and so forth. I traveled to the city of Seoul to meet her for lunch one time. We split the bill, but did not want to do anything more than spend an afternoon together on the first visit. She wanted me to come back for another visit, and I gladly obliged. This time, she took me by the arm and led me to a hotel that was absolutely lavish. I'm talking about 3 or 4 stars at least. She paid for the room. I have no idea what it cost. The bathroom was something I had never seen before. The entire room was hardwood, from the floors to the walls, ceiling, and even the tub itself, which was a hot tub style tub. All hardwood. None of this hardwood was sealed. It was meant to remain naturally porous. I will be honest, I don't even remember the sex that night, because the whole hotel itself was the standout factor there, which is nothing to say against her, honestly, because we continued to meet up for weeks to come, and still, each time, we had basically nothing to say to one another. We would just embrace one another in comfortable solace and spend our time together without complications. She even traveled to my base on a few occasions. I would check her on base under the false promise that we would stay at the base hotel, but to nobody's surprise, we simply went to my dorm room. I'm sure my neighbors were not pleased. About 2 or 3 months, I would keep seeing her until she told me one day she was leaving to travel to Australia for school, which I have no idea if it's true or not. She disappeared, and I never heard from her again. It's been 10 years. PA in a European country. One thing led to the other. Out of nowhere, I had a leg spasm and had to get out of the bed to stretch my leg. In the meanwhile, she used Google Translate to say, "I am so sorry if it's because of me." Translator to say, "Nah, it's all good, not your fault. The sex was beautiful, and I never expected her to reciprocate so well." There was no use of words, just hands, eyes, and hits, amongst a lot of other things. It's like playing Lego without reading the instructions. You work with creativity, intuition, and constant feedback. You pick up the verbal cues while playing. Years before, there was one that went horrible. We didn't sync at all. Recently, I had one experience where it was super fun and hilarious for both of us, including a lot of giggling from her. My answer is, language is not the barrier when both of you are engaged in thirsty time. Married to her for 24 years. Still don't know what she is talking about. My SO and I had been together for 16 years and can communicate in 3 languages, but sometimes even that is not enough. We have had a couple of nice 3-language fights over the years, when both of us use our first languages. Understanding is lost. We try to use English to get back on track, but being upset it is hard, and we end up laughing about the whole mess of it. In the beginning it was tricky as she could not speak my language nor English very well, and I was a beginner of her language, but cooperation and body language can get you quite far. I think after all these years, our worst fights have all been more about misunderstandings due to language problems. Easy to solve once we calm down, but was really annoying while we were at it. Me and my ex could only speak a little of each other's languages. Basically, any real conversation beyond "what's for dinner" and "love, wanna go see a movie" was held via us typing into Google Translate. It was wild being at a restaurant, eating in silence and just flashing our phone screens at each other. Anywho, the sex aspect was fine, as once things get going, there's really not all that much need for discussion. Most necessary communication can be handled by a no, or simply grabbing the person and moving them. I've done it a few times. I like to travel. Feel like a lot of things go unspoken, body language and all. Someone gets closer, maybe makes a move, and you're off. My favorite was an Italian guy who spoke a little broken English, but it wasn't great. Morning after, we're in bed, and there's a huge freaking earthquake. Chandelier shaking dangerously. Above us, I see chunks of rock crumbling outside from the balconies above, and suddenly, in the best English I've heard all weekend, he says, "This building has a no seismic protection." When I was younger, I traveled to Japan for work. As you know, the Japanese love their golf and to entertain their Western counterparts. So, we are all at the karaoke bar, getting drunk, singing, the usual. A gorgeous girl comes up to our table, says hello to one of my hosts, and chats with him in Japanese. So the night goes on, we get drunker, she gets a little handsy, and one thing leads to another. We end up in my room, in the thrust, pun intended, of passion when she starts yelling out, "Machigata ana, machigata ana." Not knowing a word of Japanese, I assume this is her vividly praising my skill. I finish up a few seconds later and she cleans up and leaves. The next day I'm on the golf course with a few of their VPs. One sinks an incredible 60-foot putt, so I yell out, "Machigata ana." He turns to me with a sour expression on his face and says in perfect English to me, "What do you mean wrong hole?" Hooked up with a Venezuelan 9 months ago who was on vacation here in the US. I'm Indian. We matched on Tinder and agreed to meet up within a day. She seemed quite taken by my pics. I picked her up from her friend's house, not quite aware that she spoke almost no English. So how did we communicate? Google Translator, of course. It was pretty smooth, honestly. I just asked her if she was okay if I drove to a hotel and she nodded. She looked a part of the typical Latina hottie, but I was surprised by how sweet and affectionate she was. We stayed at the hotel for 3 hours, and she talked, or typed, about her recent divorce. Her husband ran off with her sister. She had a baby back home who was less than 2 years old, and she was still lactating, which I found out while, well, you know what I was doing. She was embarrassed, but I didn't care. Honestly, great experience. Hope she's doing well. I was asked out by a deaf girl at work via Notes app, because I don't speak any sign language, and she couldn't read lips. After a dinner of texting back and forth, she came over to my place. After a while of making out and getting affirmative consent again on Notes, we did the deed. There is a special kind of intimacy when you take away communication. Things didn't continue because of a 10+ year age difference, but probably the best I ever had. TLDR, slept with a girl who was deaf and could only communicate with the Notes app. A friend who was deaf once took me to a party where everyone besides myself was deaf, and I didn't know sign language and couldn't read lips. Everyone was talking furiously and having a great time, and I had no idea what anyone was saying. So this is what it feels like to be deaf, I thought. When I first met my fiancée, she is Indonesian and I'm Australian. She could barely speak English, just a few simple phrases. We still hit it off and went on a few dates. We used a lot of Google Translate and hand gestures to communicate. Unconventional, but it worked for us. Anyway, after the 3rd date, we hooked up. She was quiet in bed, but it was still really intimate and passionate. In the middle of the act, she looked me right in the eyes and said, in the sweetest voice, "Do you love me?" I fell in love with her in that moment and simply replied, "Yes." I've been learning Indonesian now for about 18 months and she has been learning English. We now speak a weird Indonesian or English hybrid language to each other. And it's awesome. We're getting married in 6 months. In 1998, one was stationed in South Korea. Flirted with a girl and her friend who spoke English. Told me she thought I was cute. Hung out and got a friend of mine to be a fourth for her friend who was translating. End of the night, I called a cab for them. And she looked at me and said one of the only words I heard her say in English. "Hotel?" And well, they each got a room and me and my buddy got lucky. It wasn't great. It was drunk. Let's get this over with so we can get to sleep sex. No talking needed. The morning was a little awkward. Took off with my buddy as soon as I could and headed back to base. Still don't know if it meant anything to her. To be honest, I was 20 half IO and no sex I was having was great. I feel bad for every woman I was with until I was in my mid-20s. I was admittedly terrible. I worked overseas in the late 70s and early 80s, traveling through several countries when I was young. Had hair, an American accent, and was cute as hell. Despite not speaking much of the local languages, that didn't stop women from lining up. Physical attraction and a few adult beverages seemed to bridge any communication gap. Even in the UK, where we supposedly spoke the same language, some accents, especially Scottish, were nearly incomprehensible. It was like trying to decode a beautiful form of verbal jazz, but I still succeeded in bridging that gap too. Incredible. I had Tinder Gold and expanded my search into Mexico 6 months before my buddy's bachelor party. Matched with a very beautiful woman, we moved our conversations over to WhatsApp to share photos plus stuff, and developed a sort of long-distance pen pal / horny friend dash thing. She didn't speak a word of English, and I don't speak a word of Spanish. We communicated entirely through Google Translate, and a lot of sexy photos and videos. We met up to go drinking and dancing in Cabo. Then her and I had a fun night and morning together between her place and my resort. This was after the bachelor party. Called it a night, but they still guilted me for abandoning them. U.S.E. I spent thousands to get there, and it's my trip too. Kept in touch for a couple years afterward, but deleted WhatsApp and just haven't reached out to each other through text. Both living our own married lives. I'll keep our acts private, but it was very, very fun. We didn't speak the same language, but our bodies knew how to speak the same kind of love. I went to Colombia on a boys' trip, and I picked up some prostitutes. Honestly, the experience wasn't much different than with girls I've slept with that speak the same language as me. The odd time I might have to use Translate to understand what she was asking during foreplay, or the one time she really wanted me to pound her hard. Once I learned what words those were, it was go anytime, 100. One butt moans and sex positions are a universal language. One interesting thing did happen where I stopped because I felt like I needed to pee, so I tried to communicate that and got up. She didn't understand and followed me into the bathroom and put one leg up on the sink thinking I wanted to smash in the bathroom. Needless to say, I didn't hesitate and went to town. I was in Rio de Janeiro and matched with this beautiful Brazilian girl. I was 24, she was 10 years older, had a great smile. We talk a little on the app and agree to meet in a popular neighborhood to have drinks. We met, and I realized she must have used a translator because she really doesn't speak much English. Communication was quite limited and slow, but we seemed to enjoy each other's. Orders a lot of different shots of local alcohol. She wants to make me try, plus large beers. I was thinking, wow, I'm not used to drink that much. After a while, we agreed to leave the bar. She stands up and lead the way and I'm behind her. And I thought, damn it, badass. I innocently asks if she lives alone, and she tells me that she lives with her family. I was staying at my friend's who was working the next day, so couldn't offer to go there. She asks me if I want to go to another bar, so I told her that I've drunk enough for the night and would prefer a calm place. She then picks her phone and used the translator to say, we can go to a hotel, but I'm picking it. I was like, yes, sure. My drunk and horny ass didn't even inquire about the location or price. Then during the entire Uber trip, I wanted to pee so bad that I was in pain and couldn't really talk. It was a bit awkward, probably. Once we reached the hotel room, I rushed in the bathroom. When I came out, she was already naked and about to take a shower, and I mentally jaw-dropped at her amazing body. 101. I joined her in the shower and was instantly hard. Then we had a lot of fun and spent the night together. The hotel was a love hotel and had a huge mirror at the ceiling facing the bed. That was so hot. She became my casual sex friend for the rest of my stay. A few years later, she was touring Europe, so I flew to Madrid to spend 2 days with her and fuck. I think she's still the hottest girl I've ever had sex with. Maybe sometime we'll meet again, hee hee. This happened to me in Norway. I was living there on a visa and would frequent this bar that occasionally got pretty loud and busy clubby. This girl who was giving me eyes just came over and bumped me on the hips with hers. She was clearly a few drinks in. I tried to make conversation, but I think she was too out of it to even try English, and proceeded to just take my hand, walk out of the bar with me, and lead me to her place down the street. I'm just like, okay, this is happening. I guess I barely remember anything, aside from the zero communication, from the bar to the bed and it feeling so surreal. It was the weirdest lay I've ever had, and sex was pretty bad. I once hooked up with a Russian lady I met at a bar. She'd been staying in Australia for a short while and was learning English, but it was still quite broken. Still, we managed to flirt with each other and communicate enough to get a taxi back to her place. To say that she was talkative in bed was an understatement. In both Russian and English, I wish I knew what she was saying in Russian. She could have been telling me I was terrible or reading out a shopping list for later, but it was hot as fuck. And when she did speak in English, it was so heavily accented. It made me feel like James Bond fucking a Soviet spy.
Thank you for watching. Write comments, put likes. Do not forget to watching other videos.